Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Policki. He's Jacob Liberta. You can find all our videos here on our YouTube channel, so please hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And today we're talking Minnesota Vikings and, of course, the most polarizing player maybe in Vikings history, Kirk Cousins, QB1. We're going to be talking about, are the Vikings truly committed to Kirk? Because O'Connell had his opening press conference last week. He basically came out and said, we anticipate Kirk being here. He's under contract. He's excited to build an offense around him. He was then interviewed by Dan Barreiro and basically said, and Dan Barreiro basically straight up asked him, do you want Kirk Cousins to be your quarterback? He said yes. But now his latest interview is on the Chad Hartman show. And he basically asked him, can you unequivocally say that Kirk Cousins will be your quarterback next season? And he basically went on to say, well, we don't know what any position is going to look like at training camp. And he kind of walked around the question a little bit, but still said, he's looking forward to building an offense around Kirk and stuff like that. So I think he's trying to toe the line a little bit because that's probably the smart play, honestly, in terms of keeping your options open. But, what are your thoughts on some of these comments that O'Connell's been making the last week?
I'll tell you what, Bailey, this was music to my ears for him to not definitively be like, yeah, Kirk's our guy, and kind of dance around the question, because that leaves me a little bit of optimism that a trade is certainly a possibility in this offseason in the next month, really. So that makes me excited. And I love that this is coincidentally happening within a matter of hours, a day or two, really, from when the rumors surfaced of Carolina calling the Vikings about Kirk. So If you think Carolina's calling about Kirk, I don't think they're just going out there and they're probably putting a lot of feelers out for a lot of quarterbacks. Don't get me wrong, they're a really desperate team, but at the same time, I think they at least have to feel like that's an option for them, that the Vikings are somewhat open for business at least, or at least would entertain it. So That also makes me pretty happy because this feels like we're trending in the right direction of where I want this to go. So I got to say, this is pretty exciting. I really want to see Kirk gone by any means necessary. So I hope this momentum just keeps building.
Man, you're such a Kirk hater.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm done with the Kirk Crusaders out there.
I'm with you because he's so polarizing, and Vikings Twitter is a disaster right now. It's split right down the middle. It's almost like modern day politics. The one side absolutely loves Kirk. You can't get rid of him. You'll never win without him. The other side's saying, well, we haven't won with him. So what's the point? He's making a bunch of money. We got no money to spend on other positions. You and I probably fall, we definitely fall more so in line with, get rid of him, get some salary cap space, and just finally try and develop a young quarterback again. We tried with Teddy. He blew out his knee. Super unfortunate circumstances. We haven't tried again since then. So it's been almost 7 years now since 7 or 8 years. We drafted Teddy 8 years ago. It's time to try again. And we have Kellen Mond, but he's far from a sure thing. And so, especially now in an offseason where, Kirk Cousins is probably going to make you a better team in 2022. There's probably no doubt about that. But in an offseason where there's so many quarterback openings, so many teams that are desperate for just adequate quarterback play, especially a team like Carolina, like you said, they're desperate. Matt Rule is fighting for his job. He basically needs to prove that they're going in the correct direction. Kirk Cousins will make them a 500 team, no problem. And that shows progress in the owners of Carolina Panthers' minds. So
it's going to buy him time.
Exactly. And that's what these guys want. So Cleveland's another team where they're kind of in a holding pattern right now. It seems like things are going downhill. Jarvis Landry might not want to go back. Baker Mayfield's a mess. So Cleveland's in a messy situation. Pittsburgh Steelers are kind of in a holding pattern. They don't know what their quarterback plans are. There's other teams out there, Denver Broncos, etc. It's just in an offseason where you can get probably maximum value. This is probably the highest Kirk's trade value ever has been and ever will be, just given the demand and how well he's played really over the last couple seasons for the Vikings. You can absolutely talk a team into trading a first-round pick for him, I think. And we've seen the rumors being floated around, not rumors, but just, more so talk about, would you trade Kirk Cousins for the 6th pick and Sam Darnold, because you have to have a salary dump in return. And yeah, I would do that. You have a season of Sam Darnold. He maybe starts half the season, and then you let, either your rookie quarterback or Kellen Mond start the rest of the season, see what you have in those guys. The Vikings aren't winning in 2022, regardless of who the quarterback is. So basically all I can emphasize right now is Kirk Cousins is 34 years old, or he's going to be when the season starts. You're not going to win in 2022. Go get that maximum trade value you can right now. So 2 or 3 years from now, when Kirk Cousins isn't any good anymore and he's aging out, you're already set up because you traded him. You got draft pick compensation for him. You started your quarterback search early enough. It's about building for 2023 and beyond. No team's going to turn around that quick in 2022. So I think you and I are saying we're basically on the same page here. You've already started the rebuild because you have a new GM and new coach. Just chop the rest of it off and go get yourself a new fresh quarterback. Let O'Connell get his hands on him, develop him, and see where it goes from there. Because I don't know. It's in my mind, it's just smart business to get the maximum return you can for a guy like Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. What's the point with having Kirk here in 2022 when this team, even with Kirk, doesn't really have championship aspirations or have the makeup of a championship roster? So realistically, the difference between having Kirk is probably what I mean, he's comfortably, you can always expect him to win 8, 9 games. And then let's say you throw a bridge quarterback in there, like let's say a Jameis Winston, for instance, or maybe a Teddy Bridgewater, or I mean, you fill in the blank with whatever free agent quarterback there is out there that's just kind of been bouncing around, been a journeyman in this league. And you probably win I would say you probably bottom out at 5 wins, maybe 6. So it's like, what's really the difference? Between winning 5, 6 games or 8, 9 games, and maybe you scratch in the playoffs, maybe you don't at 8, 9 wins. Then if you don't make the playoffs, and really all you're doing is screwing yourself out of a draft pick. So basically rebuild your team even more to put yourself actually in a position to have an actual championship roster instead of just trying to feel good at the end of the day because you squeaked into the playoffs. So realistically, I love that you had to say that. And I also would like to say that it's a good time to transition a quarterback too, just because it's the beginning of a new regime, new GM, new head coach, first year. I think this is just a logical time to do that and making a move, getting Kirk out of here to a team like let's entertain that Kirk idea to Carolina. Now, if you were to take on Sam Darnold and get that 6th overall pick, people got to stop getting confused like we want to have Darnold over Cousins. No, it's about getting that 6th overall pick because there is such thing out there as a salary dump. Happens all the time in the NBA. So you're going to have to incur a bad contract to get that pick. I mean, it's the same thing that the Lions did when they traded Stafford to the Rams. They took on Goff, but it wasn't about getting Goff. It was about getting the 2 first-round picks. And I feel like people just aren't – it's not clicking for them. So realistically, you just have Darnold as like a placeholder. I get an expensive placeholder. That's also buying you a 6th overall pick, which is extremely valuable and could get you your quarterback of the future, like a Malik Willis or something, or another very good player. So I think it would make all the sense in the world to do something like that, or whatever team out there that wants to trade for Kirk, and especially if they're willing to move a first-round pick. Having 2 first-round picks is so valuable. I realize that they're kind of just lottery tickets because they don't always turn out by any means. But at the same time, they could turn into franchise cornerstones for you on a roster that severely needs young and upcoming players that we just were really lacking. So I think there's a real opportunity there to transition this team the whole way. Now that we've already moved on from our last head coach and last GM, now it's time to do it with the quarterback too and let them all come up together.
And the Darnold thing, it's 1 year. And
exactly. It's not like we're signing up for 3 years of Darnold. Like we're just basically eating up the last year of his contract, and while also at the same time saving $17 million, going from 35 or actually a $45 million cap hit for Kirk, but then you're still incurring 10 of that, so it's really 35. So it's and then Darnold's getting 18 mil, so like you're still saving $17 million. And I know Darnold, I'm a firm believer that Darnold is a certified bum, but I really don't care because I'm interested in draft picks, not the player.
Yeah, and I think there's too many Vikings fans that are just concerned about like you have to do like it's like there's always next year. There's always next year. And it's like, well, it's the start of a new season. We need to have Super Bowl aspirations. It's like, no, be realistic with yourself. And I think that's what having a new regime in place, I think that's why it's a good thing because Spielman and Zimmer were not being realistic with themselves.
They're trying to save their jobs, buy time.
They kept trying to convince themselves and ownership that, we can win this year. We can win this year. 2020 was a horrific example of how they thought they could win with a bunch of rookie players on defense. I mean, give me a break. So
sign Kirk to that bad extension.
Yeah, exactly. So like the offense is pretty much ready to go. And then, so quarterback obviously is going to be the hole if you get rid of Kirk Cousins, but you got skill players all over the place at, 3/5 of an offensive line. That's very good. So there's definitely pieces there to, and then you have an offensive minded head coach now who has, been around the block. He's seen what McVay has done in LA. He would get his opportunity to develop a young quarterback. Like, I think this is one of the most ideal situations a young quarterback could have to come into. And if you get a guy like Sam Darnold in return for that trade, theoretically, you're not forced to start your rookie right away, which we've seen over the last couple of years has kind of been disastrous for guys like Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, just to name a few. I mean, these guys have gotten kind of thrown right in, and they haven't looked good, and it's because they were on bad teams. But if you just give these guys a chance to learn, it doesn't even have to be a full season. I think half a season even is doable. So, yeah, I mean, otherwise, the other opportunity too is you just focus on. Maybe you get that first round pick for Cousins, but you don't really like any of the quarterbacks in this draft. You go and get yourself a shutdown corner and a game changing edge rusher. You build that defense back up. And like you said, maybe you sign a bridge quarterback, a Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, somebody like that. But then in 2023, because keep in mind, 2022 is not a winning season. In 2023, you do everything in your power to trade up and get a quarterback. Because then at that point, that's basically your missing piece.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would certainly make sense too. If you're not in love with any of the quarterbacks, you don't need to rush it because, again, this is year one of the regime. Yep. So taking two maybe franchise cornerstone defensive players wouldn't hurt because this defense severely lacks young talent. All of our great players on that side of the ball are all aging out. I know Kendricks, I think, still has a few more good years ahead of him. I think he's a little bit younger than the rest, but still, I mean, he's getting up there. Harrison Smith already is well above 30, well north of 30. Mm-hmm. And that one's an interesting one that's going to play out over the next few weeks. I'm not really sure what they want to do with him yet because O'Connell certainly sang his praises in his opening press conference, which I found interesting. But I think it's a situation that'll resolve itself one way or another in the next few weeks. But again, the point is that all these good players on defense are all these old guys, and we need to find new talent that's going to be a part of a potential Super Bowl roster in a couple of years. So I think that certainly won't hurt. Maybe you get a guy, like you said, a number one corner. I think I'd argue that's one of the four cornerstones of a great team is you go from the quarterback to hopefully a franchise left tackle to a dominant edge rusher and then a lockdown corner, a true number one alpha kind of guy. And that could be like a Sauce Gardner or Derek Stingley. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and just on loan Kirk to begin with, it's just opening the door so many things, because then you can address more than just one position in the first round.
Yeah. And so to clarify, because, there's probably people watching that already clicked off the video because they don't want to hear us bash Kirk. And it's for the millionth time, it's not about, Kirk Cousins being bad or, us not liking Kirk Cousins. It's more about his salary just takes so much of the cap. We're not winning with him anyways. He's 34 years old. There's so many things at play here. New regime. It's just now is the perfect time to move on because 2022, there's no expectations. Yep, and maybe some fans have expectations, but I'm telling you right now, like ownership, especially if they get rid of Kirk Cousins, like ownership's come out and said, we want to be competitive. But if they're being realistic with themselves, they're not going to be competitive with this roster. Because like you just mentioned, the defense is aging out. That they're gonna have to completely rebuild that defense. And Kirk Cousins has yet to prove that he can win more than 10 games in a season. And even then, that was when we had one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. So I don't know, man. I think it's such a clear divide right now between Vikings fans, and I just think it's all over nothing because A, none of us can control any of it. B, we're not winning. So it's time to just try something different. You can't keep bashing your head into the wall and expecting different results.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the goal here? We're trying to win 8-9 games every year just to be satisfied that we win a little bit more than we lose, or we're trying to win a Super Bowl. Like, I'm done with the mediocrity. It's just painful. Like you said, it's like bashing your head into the wall. I mean, we're not just trying to scratch in the playoffs. We're trying to go on a sustained run, and right now we're not doing that. So it's time to hit the reset button and try something else until we get to that point.
Last thing I'll say is look at the Minnesota Wild. I know it's two different sports, there's so many different aspects at play, but you get rid of Stahl, Koivu, Parise, Suter, all the fan favorites, all the best players on the team within a couple of years. All of a sudden, they've completely flipped it around in pretty quick fashion. Obviously, it helps having a superstar in Kaprizov, but that's the thing in the NFL. You got to take your chance and try and draft that superstar at quarterback. And that's really the only difference between these two franchises right now.
Exactly. And the rebuild doesn't have to be that long. You don't have to think like it's a 3-year project or something. Like you could, if you play your cards right this year and then next offseason after this really rebuild season, then you could be right back in the thick of it.
And I really trust Kwesi and O'Connell to be able to identify talent because, I mean, it's a new regime, so I guess you kind of have to give them the benefit of the doubt to start off with. But I don't know. I think their fresh perspective and new way of looking at things and not drafting players based on having a certain athletic profile that was always the talk with the Vikings is like, you have to draft this raw defensive player that Andre Patterson's going to mold. It's like, well, now we're running a 3-4 defense, so everything's different on that front. And
then when we draft offensive linemen, we really limit ourselves to the pool we would be willing to draft because of the really physical profile, talking about all these zone blockers that get on the edge and stuff and can move. It's like you're severely limiting yourself because a lot of offensive linemen don't really do that. So I think you got to think about that too.
I'm telling you right now, I think Wyatt Davis is going to start on the line next year.
I'm all for it. I'm sure he was basically not given a chance last year because Zane was very against Rick looking back on it in hindsight. So I don't think any of those rookies had a chance.
Yeah, I saw it might have been with Chris Thomason in the Pioneer Press. I don't remember. He basically had a story about Wyatt Davis, and he admitted he came into camp overweight. And then he was just kind of buried from that point on. But he said he's going to do everything he can this offseason to get back in better shape and be ready to go because the talent is there. We saw it at Ohio State. It's just, can he actually, get to that point where he's playable? So I don't know. I don't think we're that far away. Like you said, it could be a 1 year, just switch it around. But you got to open up some salary cap space because you have to compensate your defense by signing free agents. You need to sign a free agent center because I'm freaking done with Bradbury, and we're not drafting a center in the first round again. Nobody talk about Tyler Linderbaum. That's not happening. Just stop. There's other needs. You don't draft centers in the first round. Shout out to Krenzy for that one. He was right about that. You don't do it. So, draft one in the third, fourth, fifth round, whatever. Draft one later on. Maybe you can develop them. But, So, any other final thoughts from you about this offseason in general? The combine starts next week already, so it's ramping up.
The combine will be juicy because that's where all the trades start because that's one of the only times of the year that I could think of on the NFL calendar year that all the GMs are in the same room like that in close proximity. So I can't wait for all the rumors to start bubbling. I love that it's already starting really with these Kirk to Carolina talks. So I can't wait.
Yeah, me too, man. It's going to be fun. NFL offseason's becoming like the NBA offseason now. It's fantastic. So that's going to do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Like I mentioned earlier, please give this video a like and hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Feel free to give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram and leave your comments below. What are your thoughts on Kirk Cousins? Do you think the Vikings are truly committed to him? Do you want to see him moved? And what would you move him for? And also, what are your thoughts on the rebuilding process here? Because that seems to be kind of scattered all over the place amongst Vikings fans. So let us know your thoughts. And until next time, thanks for watching.